There is a hunger that food cannot fill. A gnawing emptiness that begins not in the stomach, but in the soul. For the lone traveler in the deep north, it can manifest in silence. A heavy blanket of snow and cold that smothers all sound. But sometimes that silence breaks. It starts as a whisper on the wind, a sound that almost mimics a human voice, stretched thin and hollow. You tell yourself it's just the trees, but then you see it, a flicker of movement, too tall to be a man, too thin to be a bear, a skeletal silhouette against the snow. And you feel, more than hear, a name echo in the deepest part of your mind. A name that means starvation. A name that means madness. A name that means you will be devoured. Because the Wendigo wasn't just a story meant to scare people. It was once used to explain real murders, real cannibalism, and real executions. This isn't a campfire story. It's a question etched into the history of a continent. It's the story of the Wendigo. Originating in the folklore of Algonquian-speaking people, this entity is far more than a simple monster. It is the spirit of winter, the personification of famine, and a chilling warning against the darkness we carry inside ourselves. We will follow this story into the frozen wilderness where it was born from the very real threat of starvation. We'll uncover the horrifying accounts where myth and reality bled into one another. And we will explore how this ancient spirit evolved into a disturbing psychological diagnosis, forcing us to ask a deeply unsettling question. Was the Wendigo ever just a myth? Or is the hunger it represents a shadow that still lingers, waiting for the right moment of weakness to take hold? If you picture a beast with a deer's skull and towering antlers, you are picturing a modern invention, a monster shaped more by Hollywood than history. The authentic Wendigo, the one whispered about for centuries, is infinitely more human, and therefore infinitely more horrifying. Traditional stories describe a creature that was once a person. It is gaunt to the point of emaciation, its ashen skin pulled so tightly over its bones it looks like a walking skeleton, standing unnervingly tall. Its eyes are said to glow like cold embers, but its most grotesque features are a testament to the hunger so profound that it turns upon itself. In its ravenousness, the Wendigo is said to have gnawed off its own lips, leaving a bloody, jagged maw. Its fingers, too, often chewed to the bone. At the core of this creature is a heart made of solid ice. Its presence brings an unnatural chill, and it emits a stench of decay. Yet, the most terrifying aspect of the Wendigo is not its appearance, but its defining characteristic, an insatiable, all-consuming hunger. According to many traditional beliefs, whenever a Wendigo consumes a victim, it grows in size proportional to the meal. A cruel paradox that means it can never be full. Every act of cannibalism only makes its hunger more agonizing. It is the very embodiment of excess, forever starving, forever hunting. But the most disturbing part of the Wendigo legend isn't what it looks like. It's the fact that people believed it could happen to anyone. To lure its prey, the Wendigo is a master of mimicry. It can replicate the cries of a baby or the voice of a loved one, drawing victims into the wilderness. It is a spirit of deception, a predator that uses our own humanity against us before stripping it away in the most brutal way imaginable. This is not a mindless beast. It is a cunning hunter, driven by a gnawing emptiness that reflects the very environment from which it sprang. The legend of the Wendigo was not told for entertainment. It was a crucial part of a worldview shaped by the brutal realities of life in the northern forests. It was the personification of winter itself, cold, cruel, and relentlessly hungry. The story was a powerful tool to enforce the communal values necessary for survival. In a world where a long winter meant the difference between life and death, selfishness and greed were existential threats. The Wendigo was the ultimate symbol of what happens when an individual gives in to those impulses. There are several versions of its creation. A lost hunter, facing starvation, makes the horrifying choice to consume another human to survive, corrupting their spirit. A warrior makes a pact with a dark spirit for power, only to lose their soul in the bargain. Or perhaps, the most frightening, the Wendigo is possessing spirit. They can invade a person's mind, planting the seed of cannibalistic desire until it blossoms into madness. The first written accounts come from the Jesuit missionaries in the 17th century. A collision of worldviews. In 1661, the Jesuit relations described a chilling event where several men were seized with an ailment unknown to us, giving them a canine hunger for human flesh. They became so dangerous that death is the sole remedy, and they were slain in order to stay the course of their madness. The Jesuits saw a strange disease. The indigenous peoples saw a spiritual affliction, a corruption so profound that the person was already gone. The name itself, Wendigo or Wendigo, is debated by linguists, but it's often traced to a Proto-Algonquian root, Win-ti-koa, meaning ghost or cannibal monster. It was a name for the embodiment of the worst fears of the northern people: the biting cold, the gnawing hunger, and the terrifying possibility that the greatest monster one could face was a neighbor or even oneself. For centuries, the Wendigo was a symbol. But what happens when a symbol decides to walk out of the woods into reality? In the late 19th century, Canadian authorities would come face to face with a man who not only believed in the Wendigo, but claimed to have become one. His name was Swift Runner. In the winter of 1878, Swift Runner, a well-respected Cree trapper, led his wife, 6 children, and a mother-in-law into the forests of what is now Alberta. In the spring, he emerged alone, claiming his entire family had starved to death. It was a tragic, but not uncommon story. However, suspicions arose. A Hudson Bay Company supply post, stocked with emergency food, was located just 25 miles from his camp. Why would an experienced trapper let his entire family starve when help was so close? The Northwest Mounted Police investigated his winter camp. What they found was a scene of unimaginable horror. Human bones picked clean. A child's skull in a cooking pot. Confronted, Swift Runner's story unraveled. He confessed that a Wendigo spirit had possessed him, filling him with an uncontrollable desire to eat human flesh. One by one, he had killed and devoured most of his family. He was no longer Swift Runner. He was the Wendigo. The confession sent shockwaves. To the Cree, he had succumbed to the ultimate spiritual corruption. To the Canadian legal system, he was a murderer. The idea of a Wendigo spirit was dismissed as superstition. At his trial in 1879, Swift Runner calmly recounted the events and was sentenced to death. His case remains one of the most chilling documented instances of when a Wendigo takes over a person, where the Wendigo was not just a legend, but a madness that transformed a man into a monster. If someone truly believes they're no longer human, does that make them a monster or a victim? Swift Runner shows us a man who became the monster. But his story begs another question. If the monster is real, who hunts it? In the early 20th century, the clash between indigenous law and colonial authority would center on 2 OG Cree brothers, Jack and Joseph Fiddler. Jack Fiddler was a renowned shaman and Ojima, known for his powers to protect his people from the Wendigo. Over his lifetime, he claimed to have defeated 14 Wendigos. These were not beasts in the woods. These were members of his own community who, in his eyes, their family's eyes, were in the process of transforming, afflicted with an incurable desire for human flesh. For the Sukkur people, a person turning Wendigo was a dire threat. It was the shaman's duty to intervene. The process was a somber ritual, seen not as a murder, but as a mercy killing, to release the person from their torment and protect the community. This practice had gone on for generations, but in 1907, the Northwest Mounted Police heard tales of the Fiddler brothers and arrested them for murder. The trial was a profound cultural misunderstanding. The brothers did not deny their actions. They saw them as a sacred duty. Their community understood that they had acted to prevent a greater horror. But the Canadian court saw only a violation of its law. While in custody, Jack Fiddler, estimated to be in his 60s or 70s, took his own life. His brother Joseph was found guilty and sentenced to prison, where he died just days before a pardon arrived. This case is a tragic collision of two worlds. The Fiddlers were not murderers in their own eyes. They were protectors. Their story leaves us with a haunting question. Were they executing sick family members? Or were they truly slaying monsters? As these stories bled out of the wilderness, a new name was created to contain them: Wendigo Psychosis. It was an attempt by Western observers in the 20th century to provide a scientific diagnosis for a spiritual phenomenon. The diagnosis was characterized by a terrifying set of symptoms: paranoia, a morbid fear of becoming a cannibal, the delusion of being possessed by the Wendigo spirit. This would culminate in an overwhelming craving for human flesh. The psychiatric perspective says that the brutal winters and the constant threat of famine created a perfect storm for a mental breakdown. The Wendigo legend provided the cultural script for that breakdown. However, the very existence of Wendigo psychosis as a distinct mental illness is now debated. Some anthropologists argue that accusations of being a Wendigo may have been a social tool, a way for a starving community to justify executing an individual who was hoarding food or acting selfishly. Modern psychiatry no longer recognizes Wendigo psychosis as a formal disorder. It is now considered a culture-bound syndrome of historical interest. But whether it was genuine psychosis, or a social phenomenon, or a spiritual affliction, the reports are undeniable. For centuries, a madness drove people to cannibalism, blurring the line between a monster of the mind and a monster of the flesh. The forests have shrunk. The long winters are less threatening. So where did the monster go? It didn't vanish. It adapted. Today, the Wendigo has become a powerful metaphor for the insatiable hungers that plague our own society. At its core, the Wendigo is a creature of consumption. It eats, yet only grows hungrier. In this, many have seen a reflection of our world. Activists use the term Wendigo economics to criticize a system that promotes endless growth on a finite planet. A corporate greed that devours resources and communities without ever being satisfied. It's the perfect symbol for a culture that is constantly told it needs more, yet finds itself spiritually empty. The hunger has also become personal. It represents the gnawing emptiness that can come from a loss of connection. In an age of digital isolation, the Wendigo's selfish hunger feels hauntingly familiar. Popular culture has featured it, of course, but it often focuses on the monster outside, the antlers, the claws, rather than the monster within. They miss the point. The true horror of the Wendigo was never that it might eat your body. The true horror was that you could become one. It represented the terrifying fragility of our own humanity, a thin line between community and a self-devouring hunger. It is a cautionary tale that warns us that unchecked greed, whether for flesh, for power, or for possessions, ultimately consumes the consumer. The Wendigo is a creature of many faces. It's a spirit of the frozen north, born from the gnawing hunger of winter. It is a historical specter, a name given to the real-life horrors of men like Swift Runner. It is a psychological puzzle and a modern metaphor for the corrosive greed of our own era. Was it ever a literal monster stalking the forests? Or was it always a manifestation of the darkness that lurks within the human heart, unleashed by desperation and greed? The answers remain buried in the stone. The story of the Wendigo teaches us that the line between man and monster is terrifyingly thin. It is a warning that is echoed through centuries. When a person or society becomes consumed by an insatiable hunger, the Wendigo doesn't just walk out of the woods. Once it takes hold, it follows you home. If this story made you hungry, be careful what you crave. Subscribe if you want to keep exploring the darkness that lurks within. And tell me in the comments, what is the great insatiable hunger that haunts our modern world? And what do you think it's trying to show us? Thank you for watching. And if you feel a little emptier than when you started, don't worry. That's how it begins.